Welcome to Founder Radio. I'm your host, Hugo. In this podcast, you'll hear in-depth conversations with the globe's most exciting company founders. We'll talk about their ideas, their successes, their challenges, and their learnings along the way. At Founder Radio, we celebrate founders, and we believe that innovative founders are critical to deal with the challenges humans face. They are society's explorers and work in uncertainty to expand our practical knowledge each and every day. Building something from scratch requires creativity, intelligence, conviction, and endurance. Get inspired and learn from those that are changing the world. Hey everyone, welcome to Founder Radio. Thanks for listening. Today we're talking to Vidit. Vidit's born in India, educated in Singapore, and after a stint in investment banking, he was the first employee of Uber in Asia. He moved on to Caro, entrepreneur first, Stripe, and then founded GajiGesa in 2020, headquartered in Jakarta, Indonesia. It's a financial management platform for employees, and today has amassed 350,000 users. Really looking forward to the conversation, and we'll discuss his journey from India to Singapore to Indonesia, the iconic organizations he's been part of, and especially his company, GajiGesa. Vidit, it's great to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Hugo. Thanks for having me here. Very excited for the conversation.
Thank you. Good to have you. Vidit, in Indonesia, you saw a population of 275 million, of which 70% is unbanked. So they don't have any access to bank accounts, credit, and insurance. They typically make less than $5 a day. The 48 million Indonesians that are employed make less than $700 a month, and 30% of those take interest rate loans with super high interest rates of up to 350% a year. You saw this and you founded GajiGesa. How would you qualify the problem that you saw and the solution that you offer with the company?
Yeah, so when you think about Indonesia, and thank you for bringing up some of the stats, Indonesia is not a small country. When you think about the worldview, you often don't talk about Indonesia. But like you said, 275 million people, 170 million plus are underbanked. So they may have a bank account, but they haven't used it in the last 3 months. Often all transactions happen on cash. And when we started thinking about problems to solve, one of the things which we realized was a lot of these blue-collar workers, and which is about 120 million people total, both employed in a professional sector or may not be, was earning less than $500 a month. It's a massive market. A lot of them were borrowing, and it's a cultural thing where Indonesians like to borrow, and they were under debt all the time. Think about the borrowing costs of 15%, 20%, 30% month over month. I'm not talking about a year. I'm talking about the monthly cost. Or it could be I borrow $50 from you today and I pay $70 on Friday. So there's a lot of predatory borrowing that was happening. And the scale at which it was happening, which was unregulated, the regulator has tried to solve these problems, but at that scale, and if it's informal, it's impossible to solve. So we decided that this is the problem we want to tackle because it affects the most vulnerable of people of the society and want to do something for them.
And what was first, your intention to start a company in Indonesia, or did you first see this problem and then the rest followed? What was the order of things when you started GajiGesa?
Okay, so I'll tell you my thinking of progress. First, we wanted to do a startup. I think on the personal level, one needs to be ready to be a founder. It took us a while, but my co-founder, who's my wife, both of us sat down and said, okay, there is a problem to solve. Then we wanted to look at a market that was big enough where we could have had impact. And Indonesia, when it comes to Southeast Asia, is the biggest market. Out of 600 million people, half of them are in Indonesia, from Southeast Asia. Then we looked at the sector we wanted to solve for. And both of us, my co-founder Martina and I, cared a lot about impact. In my different roles at Uber and especially Caro, I dealt with a lot of blue-collar workers. Either they were car mechanics or drivers, or when Martina was working at Lendo EFL, she was credit scoring the unbanked customers. So she had seen a lot of people in factories. So we knew there was this problem, right? So we had figured out a market and we had figured out a solution or a target segment which we had to solve for. And the third was on the personal self. Is the Indonesia a market we want to live in? Are we comfortable? because being personally happy is also very important, and we really like Indonesia. Both of us have been visiting there for work for the last decade. People are cheerful, great, a lot of young talent upcoming. It's going through the first cycle of VC money. So we thought it's the right time, right country, right opportunity, and right individuals to solve for. And that's how we ended up with GajiGesa.
Great. And you hit the 3 birds with 1 stone. I mean, this is the very early days, but now you have a baffling 350,000 employees on your platform. Tell us about the process of going from 0 to 350,000.
Yeah, I think 0 to 1, which is always the most challenging one. So getting our first 10 customers. So our business model is earned wage access, where we partner with the businesses, and then the blue collar workers can withdraw their earned salary, pro rata salary at any point of time. And at the end of the month, whatever they withdraw gets deducted from the payroll. So our life cycle is we work with the business, onboard them, provide the benefits of GajiGesa, and then they offer it to their workers. Think of insurance, how a big business provides insurance across the world, insurance benefits. So when we started, our main goal was how do we get that first 10 customers? And of course, there were a lot of friends, there were investors we had to go to, and we got about 7, 8 of them as a start. And sometimes they were trying to help us, they were trying to do a favor, they saw the value, and then getting the next set of customers who were cold sold. So we started reaching out to bigger businesses. We started building networks. Think of enterprise sales, right? So we had business partners who would introduce us to big HR leaders. We joined conferences, and we continuously harped on the one problem which businesses were facing. Now, what we are solving is not unique in some ways, because Indonesia has this word kasbon. Kasbon means early salary. So workers for decades have been going to their employers and saying, can you please pay me half of my salary? I don't have money. Otherwise, I won't be able to come tomorrow. So when we went to the businesses, we said, there is a problem that exists. Your HR handles it. Your finance handles it. They have to record it. It affects your cash flow. Can we handle all that? So first step was to figure out our GTM. Second step was to figure out the right pitch, the right note, right? Like immediately we were telling them, hey, you have a problem. We all know you have a problem. Let me come and solve it for you. So that is how we started building momentum.
Is that the key draw for employers, for employees to enable that taking out a piece of your salary before it was sort of scheduled to be paid? And is that also what you call earned wage access?
Yeah, that is exactly earned wage access. And that is something that's already happening. It's not unique to the employer. They understand the solution. They understand the problem.
Got it. And sorry, I interrupted you. What were you about to say?
No, I was just saying that, employers recognized this, they supported it. And we were very clear with one messaging. We were not trying to oversell. We were just like, hey, this is your problem. It affects your cash flow. It affects your HR. It affects your finance team. Let us take over all of that and solve it for you and give you visibility in your employees' finances. Let you as an employer do something good for your employees at a minimum cost.
And what happened after that 0 to 1 phase? And you described, hey, finding that product market fit, finding the right way of pitching it and convincing the companies, but also the employees. What happened after that those first 10 customers, say?
So after the first 10 customers, we knew we had a product market fit. We knew what the pitch was. After that, there was a lot of refinement. Of course, the products evolved over the years, but I'd spent some time at Stripe, and Stripe was very much, you do enterprise sales and you make it a machine. You repeat again and again, and you keep on refining, but repeat. As that is how we started thinking. That we had a very strong product and engineering team, which went onto the ground, which got feedback from our users, tried to understand that not only they wanted to withdraw in their bank account, they wanted to withdraw in e-wallets, which is very popular. They wanted to pay their electricity bill, their water bills. They wanted to buy prepaid phone top-ups. So we kept on learning more and more through our customers. We kept on listening to them on the ground. And on the sales side, we tried to build a machine. Just repeat, target the right segment, find the right partners, and execute.
And were those sort of the collecting of feedback of your users, was that very much one-to-one, or did you try and do that in a more scalable way as well?
So it was all of it. When you're very small and you're 10 people, you want to go and talk to the customer because there's nothing better than that. You're also working with a segment which is not only very poor, but sometimes also not well respected in society. There is a general lack of confidence, and there is this fear, there is this scared of giving feedback, right? So we had to go onto the ground. We had to make that environment comfortable. We had to watch them use the app. What are the challenges? Which tap are they getting stuck at? Of course, that was not scalable. So then we started doing focus discussions. We couldn't reach out to all our users as we grew. We started getting a lot of feedback from HRs. We started sending out surveys. But again, a lot of our feedback, that process of getting feedback may have evolved, but our decision making still remains the same, where we talk to our users, we understand what they want, and then we go back and build that.
Got it. And after finding product market fit, is the growth, did that happen in different distinct phases, or was it a continuous process of just building the enterprise sales machine, getting the user feedback, and keep on going, keep on iterating?
I think growth took a while. First, we figured out a particular region. Then we had to go and build relations, because Indonesia is a bunch of provinces, and I think we have close to 7,000 islands. So it's not as easy as being in the US sometimes. Different dialects, different cultures, just in Indonesia as well. So then as we expanded to a different region, we went outside Java. We went to the likes of Bali or Kalimantan, which are, again, not to the outside world, may not seem very different, but in Indonesia can be very different business, right? So we found the right team, the right local partners, and then we started expanding in these markets. Also, we're a business where we provide capital, so debt was a key factor. And as a founder, I learned a lot on how do you plan debt, how do you go and raise debt. We've also gone through the fascinating times of 2020, where fundraising was super easy and people would come to your home and say, please take my money. And now we live in a world where we have to do 20 rounds before somebody even gets excited about business models. So we continuously balancing your debt to equity and growth. There have been different pillars of something we've focused on.
And what's your business model?
So we provide it as a benefit. So we work with the employers provide GajiGesa. We take a fee, platform fee, for the services which we provide per employer or per transaction. That can be paid by the employer, where employers have the CSR budget, have the employee benefit budget, and they allocate it to GajiGesa. But in certain cases, the employers may not. So in that case, they pass the cost to the employee. So very flexible, but the platform fee is where we make money.
Got it. Okay. And there's no interest rate deltas where you make money as well, for example?
No, so we don't see ourselves as a lender. All we are doing is we are enabling a worker to get the salary which they would have got at the end of the month, because we have a single cycle in a month of salary.
Got it. Okay.
In Indonesia.
And is there any competition? And if so, how do you differentiate?
I think competition is good. I'm worried if there's no competition, because clearly we are in the wrong segment. So we've had competition come in and go, but we really don't worry about it because we've done well. We continue to be the biggest player. Our differentiation is, what we realized very early was that a lot of startups, and not just earned wage access, lending startups, P2P players, everyone was just focused on Jakarta or Greater Jakarta, which is roughly 20 million people. What we realized was nobody was catering outside. So nobody was going to the tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, villages where big factories are there. There are employers employing 40,000, 50,000 workers. Nobody was really targeting them. So very early in our cycle, about 2022, a lot of our focus shifted outside Jakarta. So today, most of my sales is outside Jakarta. And like to say Surabaya, Bandung, Bogor, think of tier 2 cities, still big cities. We are a very populated country, especially when you compare that to Europe. But again, not as focused as Jakarta, where the tech is not there. And that became our strong suite.
Yeah, I mean, and from the numbers you told me earlier, that also means that more than 90% of the user base in Indonesia alone is outside of Jakarta. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And Vidit, what's your typical customer journey? And to me, it sounds like the employers are typically the ones deciding to engage. So could you walk us through a customer journey for the employers?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we reach out to business owners, and that could be a direct reach. It could be a cold reach by our team. It could be through our business partners we have across Indonesia. It could be various associations and unions we work with. When an introduction happens, our team or me would go and talk to the business owner, tell our story. Once they are interested and see the value, we get to present the HR, but which is more on the operational side on onboarding. And then our onboarding is actually very smooth. It could be done in person. It could be done online. Our app is very easy to use. So even if the worker hasn't been told how to use it, you go to the app, click 3 buttons, and you can withdraw money. And whenever somebody wants money, they figure it out. So from our first pitch to our first transaction, meaning first time we talk to the employer, to the employee withdrawing on the app, could be as short as 30 days. And when I talk about 30 days, we talk about a company with few thousand employees.
And is there a risk of fraud? Like, for example, I imagine when you onboard, say, a factory of 50,000 workers, there's huge incentive for fraudsters to try and pretend they are part of those employees. Is that an issue, or am I just making that up?
Not really, because what happens is that the data of the employees are onboarded on the platform by the employer.
Okay.
So all the employees that are on payroll in most cases would be added to our system. And that management is done by the HR.
Okay.
So a third person can't. Like you and I, if you want to join or pretend, we can't, because we can only use the app when my employer allows me access.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that saves a lot of headache, I imagine. And you're keen to achieve sustainable growth and be break even in early 2025. What's the underlying thinking there? Is that peace of mind? Is there another strategic goal that you have? Like, why is breaking even important to you at this phase of the company?
I think few factors. One, which is by default, when you run a business, you want to break even. And that shows that you're building a real business and you're not riding on VC money. So we've always thought about like our unit economics works. And as we are growing, our fixed costs continue to go down or remain stable, which means our unit economics look better and better. And we want to be EBITDA positive early next year, which means we are building a sustainable business where we are not dependent on external money. The second factor is more on how the environment is today, especially in Southeast Asia. Fundraising hasn't been easy. So again, we want to be a business that is not dependent on VC, the need for growth. We should be able to continue to grow, at the same time be sustainable.
Yeah. And from where you're now to, say, Q1 2025 break even, what needs to happen to get there?
I think we need to be careful of our costs. For the last 1 year, we've grown 2.5x and our fixed costs can remain same. So there's a lot of thinking around automation. We've started using a lot of AI for our support. So we've been very prudent, and that culture needs to continue. Secondly, we would also like to grow up close to 2x in the next 12 months, which is very much possible with a pipeline. But that would really help us break even.
Yeah, can imagine. So where do the AI automation tools that you mentioned, where do they really move the needle in GajiGesa?
I think automation tools, when we think about onboarding, we work in tier 2, tier 3 cities where the employer may not be very tech savvy, especially the HRs. So we've built a lot of tools to make sure that the onboarding is not manual, which saves a lot of manual labor on our side. So today they can add their employees, they can remove their employees on their dashboards, they can train those employees, all the payroll management happens on that platform. So that has really been a cost saver for us.
Got it.
Secondly, we used to do a lot of support. Again, a lot of workers would ask us questions on how to use the app or some trivial questions, which we used to support them on. Recently, we've moved that to all AI and Bahasa. The language support is in Bahasa. It's not in English. Bahasa is the local language of Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia. All that support is happening on Bahasa with a 99% accuracy, which again has been a big efficiency factor for us, because today, as we grow, we don't need to add headcounts for any support.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's great.
As well.
Very impressive. You started the company remote. Would you ever go back to having everyone in the same building?
So we have started become a hybrid now. We started completely remote because we were in 2020. We didn't know each other. Everything was happening on Zoom. I feel, and I may be slightly old-fashioned, I'm a more fan of hybrid than complete remote. I feel it's important to continue to learn. And again, Indonesia is a very young market. A lot of the people who are working for big tech, this is the first generation. It's not the second or third generation like Europe or US. So people are still learning how to be in remote situation and be completely efficient. So as a company, we do 2 days a week, which means the teams have to come in 2 days a week, and that's their choice. Some people like to come in Mondays and Wednesdays or Tuesdays or Thursdays, the combination they like. But it's very important for me to be coming to office and seeing people once a week, doing your team meetings in person. So fully remote, I may not go back, but I'm quite happy being hybrid of where we are.
Yeah. And Vidit, before GajiGesa, you've worked at a couple of really iconic organizations, UBS, Uber, Entrepreneur First, Stripe. Could you maybe go over that list and then tell us a bit about your key takeaways from those organizations?
Yeah, sure. So my first job out of college, full-time job, was UBS. And UBS was also a Swiss bank, so probably not the fast-moving organization. But for me, there was so much to learn from the organization because of structure. As a student in university, you've worked in projects, you worked on co-curricular activities, you've been associated with associations, but the way UBS used to operate, where you have to bring in the engineering teams or you're working on a project, you have to think about security, you're working in different time zones, you have to socialize, you have to work with different people. It's big organization, it's quite political as well. For me, that was a lot of learning as somebody just fresh out of college. I did a couple of years there, and then I got a chance to work for Uber. Very, very different organization. Always, you have to be fast moving. You have to be always delivering. I was there for close to 5 years. So I've seen different life cycles or different stages of the company, but just very entrepreneurial at all stages. So the hustle was amazing, which I absolutely loved. The people I worked with, used to always hire top talent across the globe. We had different kinds of principles, which nobody even talks about now, but hustle was one, stepping on toes, always pushing back to make the organization a better place for everyone. So again, for your audience, I'm still very old school Uber. I really enjoyed working and seeing that transition. But the speed of execution and making things happen with the little information you have to make decisions at any point of time was quite impressive. And I think that's where my grooming happened. Post that, I joined Stripe. Again, a massively different, and I did a stint at Caro, which is a local organization. But again, Stripe was a very big cultural shock for me because it's a very intellectual environment. People really think about before making their decisions. There was a lot of thought given to writing your ideas. People would write these very deep papers. And I came from a school where it was like, just let's get things done. Let's get things done. So I had to really, again, take a step back and learn that kind of culture, which was nothing wrong. Like, it was just a different organization, operated very differently, but very successful at the same time. So I've gone through this culture of like being very slow and working through different organizations at UBS to just getting things done at Uber to Stripe, thinking intellectually about the vision, mission of the company, and always thinking about strategies before you action something.
Got it. And it sounds like a great mix that you can apply now at GajiGesa.
No, absolutely. And I've tried to bring a lot of learnings from UBS. So there's certain aspects where how do we interact with the cross teams is some of the learnings from UBS. The speed of execution comes from Uber. The product mindset comes from Stripe. So it's a mix of different experiences I've had over the years.
Great. And you've started angel investing as well. I'd love to talk a little bit about that. Maybe my first question is, how do you at first select companies to invest in?
Yeah, so angel investing, like for most angel investors, it just happened. I initially didn't put in a lot of thought, but the whole thing was that I always had my blinkers on. So when I was working at Uber, just thinking about Uber at all times. And I thought that by working with, spending time on angel investing, I could learn different things about the world. I'll again use a cliched statement, but I used to come in very early, right? Like I was the first check in. There was no product. There was generally most of the time a deck. And for me, it was everything about founders. Everyone says so, but most of the time, whatever they're going to start, they may pivot, it may not happen. But I generally look for resilience in founders, people who have failed before, people who have gone through tough times before. I'm a big fan of that. And it just shows that the grit they've gone through, things may work out, things may not work out. But there are some people who just jump out of the ship the moment there is a problem, whereas some people continue to excel. I also like to invest in founders who have had 10 or 15 years of experience. That's a bit of a personal bias. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but most of my portfolio of investments are where founders are mid-30s or 40s. And it just shows that they've gone through a lot of real world experience before they start a startup.
Got it. And do you focus on certain themes, or could it really be any kind of business as long as you like the team along those axes that you just described?
Generally, I need to understand the business. I may not be a user, and that's totally fine. But I don't do medtech because that's not my capability. I don't do biotech because that's not what I understand. Over the years, I've done a lot of marketplaces. I've invested a few EV companies, a lot of fintech companies. So that's just wherever I can understand the business and I can relate to the founder, I would invest.
And which companies are doing particularly well?
It's been a mix, like especially in the recent times. I won't name many But across Southeast Asia, I've had a few wins. In the US, there have been good investments as well, but still early. We'll have to wait another 4 or 5 years.
Okay, got it. And Vidit, you founded GajiGesa with your spouse. Do you recommend it?
Well, every man to himself on this topic. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. The way I would describe it is whenever you have good days, you have really good days because you bring a lot of happiness back from office to home. But when you have bad days, you do the vice versa as well. So it comes down to balance between the couple. But I think the big positive is trust and understanding, because you are married for a reason, or you're together with somebody for a reason because you get along and you trust each other. And that often reflects at workplace. I've seen so many founders, even in my own portfolio, getting into fights. So not one person right, not person wrong, but that really affects the company. Having a spouse there, you generally trust more and the comfort level is much higher. So positives and negatives.
And how did starting the company with your spouse come about? Was that a dream you both already had, or was it a bit more ad hoc because you stumbled on this idea? How did that happen? Can you elaborate a bit?
Yeah, so actually, we were trying to do different things in 2020 when we decided to start companies. Working together was never a part of the plan. But I was testing some ideas which were going nowhere. And my co-founder, Martina, at that point of time was very clear. She wanted to focus on the blue-collar segment. She wanted to do it in Indonesia, and earned wage access is something she was passionate about. And the model has been decently successful in the US and Europe. She wanted to bring that to Southeast Asia. So she started, and I could be called the first hire of the company.
Got it.
And that's how we started working together.
Very cool. And I like that it's clearly been going so well. And let's talk a little bit about the companies that you've been active in, Vidit. Let's start with Singapore, where you got educated and got your first jobs. It has a great reputation for really good government. Could you tell us a bit more about what that looks like on the ground and give some examples?
Yeah, I mean, Singapore is an excellent country. I'm so blessed and lucky to be here for the last 20 years. I came here, I grew up in India in a middle-class family.
Where in India are you from?
There's a city called Dehradun. I don't think your audience would have heard of it. They think about the nearest city would be Rishikesh, where Beatles went and Steve Jobs went. So it's always mentioned in their books. But I grew up in a tier 2 town. I didn't even know about international opportunities. But Singapore had various scholarship programs which one could avail and come here and based on the scholarship survive. Right? Otherwise, it was not practical for me to come to Singapore. So that's where the journey started, that they funded top talent or talent across, from different regions to come to Singapore, get top class education. I think the university where I went to, National University of Singapore, is one of the best to go to, especially with a mix of Asia and the West. So they bring a lot of top talent. It is one of the safest countries in the world. I don't even lock my door and haven't done it for years. So as a family, it's a great place to come in and have kids. Just professionally, everything works. It's very, very efficient, very clean. So that's some of the, just for lifestyle. But even for businesses, you can set up a business within an hour. You can open a bank account within the day. Extremely efficient. The tax slabs are quite clear. It's been a haven for a lot of rich family offices across from Indonesia, India, Indonesia. So there was a stat I was reading that in the last 3 years since COVID happened, about 1,000 family offices have opened in Singapore.
Wow.
So just because everything is so clear and it's professional, it's a great place to do business.
And fast, like an hour for business and a day for bank account is unheard of. And how do you
Everything
think...
happens online.
Yeah. How do you think they pull it off? Like, it sounds like the Singaporean government has a model of getting things done, organizing stuff in a way that really works for inhabitants, whereas a lot of other governments struggle to make improvements there. What's your theory about how they manage to pull that off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a professional, but I'd say a few things. One, Singapore is an accidental country. It wasn't going to happen, but it happened in 1965, and there's a lot of history between Singapore and Malaysia. So Singapore basically came out with nothing, and they had to start on the ground. So luckily, we had amazing leadership in Lee Kuan Yew, and he got the best minds together. And his thinking was to make this the business capital, which is what it is for Southeast Asia, just Asia in general. So they made sure there is very little to no corruption. Everything is efficient. it also invites a lot of businesses from across the region to come and set up in Singapore and just to make a great business city.
Can you tell a bit more about how Singapore's changing? You already mentioned family offices being set up in a rapid pace, but what else has been happening, say, the last 5 years?
I mean, I would say Singapore is Singapore Inc. It runs like a very efficient business. Now, there might be some downsides, but again, that is a view everyone has. But generally, they've been really efficient in bringing businesses in Singapore. Singapore is a very efficient port which connects the region. They've really supported startup ecosystem, not just now. Like Singapore has been investing in this ecosystem, and I'm a product of that benefit. I got a scholarship to go to Stanford for a year and spend time there in that ecosystem and come back, all funded by the Singapore government. So they've been investing in people. They've been finding the best opportunities and bringing them back to Singapore.
And what about Indonesia? Along the things that you've just discussed, could you compare the two countries a bit for us?
I think Indonesia is more of a normal developing country. So it has all the benefits of being a developing country with just younger population, massive opportunity, problems to solve. But as a big developing country, which you see in India or Brazil or Mexico or in Africa, it has similar challenges of sometimes there is corruption in the system. It may not be very efficient. Politics can play a big role in different parts. But again, overall, when you look at the GDP of Indonesia per capita, which is literally double of India, they have done very well over the last 30 years. They've built good infrastructure to connect different islands across Indonesia. And they've been quite efficient in respecting and bringing in a lot of technology in the last decade.
I wanted to ask that, what's the business climate like?
Mix of both. Could be very traditional. You still have a lot of paper that needs to be pushed around. So each time, every week, I would be probably scanning 30, 40 pages of documents. But at the same time, there's a lot of respect for innovation. Government generally supports it. Banks are supporting startups and all. Of course, there needs to be a business reason. But generally, there's an openness to innovation that startups are there. They're doing something good for society. They're bringing in new tech, and one needs to evolve.
You mentioned there was a big sort of first wave of startups and VC-founded companies happening in Indonesia. Are there particular events that triggered that, or what? If not, what are the drivers for that happening now?
So in Indonesia, startups really started around 2012, 2013. Obviously, one of the bigger names was Gojek, which is a local player, started around the same time. Around the same time, I think the international VCs were looking for more pastures. They had invested in India by then. China was a big hub. And Southeast Asia was largely untouched. And that was the point. I think some international VCs started looking at this market. There was also local homegrown individuals who had worked for firms in the US or Europe and came back and set up shop. That started feeding capital into the system. There have been a lot of exit stories which young individuals had heard in India and the US, and everyone wanted to replicate that in Indonesia. So it was great timing in 2013, 2014, where there were new VCs. There was some money that was coming in. At the same time, there was a younger crop which wanted to take some risks. But I would still say that we are still in the first cycle because we haven't seen a lot of exits for the funds. They're still on fund one. They haven't closed that. So it'll be interesting to see what would be the performance. But generally, we've seen last 10 years, a lot of startups have come up serving every sector of society.
Sounds great. It sounds like a really good time to be there. You also mentioned that quality of life is super high in Indonesia. Could you elaborate a bit on that? Why is it so great to live there?
I think one is, it's just a great location. You've got great environment. I'm not a big fan of cold weather, so I absolutely love being in Indonesia. The culture is great. There's a lot of, especially Jakarta, you've got young individuals from all over Indonesia coming to Jakarta to make it happen, to make it big. You've got a great mix of ideas, very ambitious, very hardworking, a lot of fun. And then you are seeing changes happen on a daily basis. So everyone feels energized. So overall, I think Jakarta is a great city. Of course, bigger problems like traffic and all, which any big city would have. But there's a lot of opportunity. Even today, 10 years of different startup operations, there's so much of opportunity on the ground that it really excites any mind.
Sounds like a lot of fun. I hope I'll have an opportunity to come pay you a visit there. Hey, Vidit, it's been great to get to know you a bit better, hear the story of GajiGesa. Before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience?
No, just Thank you for hosting me. I really appreciate it. And say hi to everyone in Europe.
You man, and the pleasure has been all mine, has been all us. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Best of luck with everything, GajiGesa, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Hugo. You're very kind.